Hi, everybody. It's Nancy Reyes. Joanne is going to join us shortly. She is having a little bit of technical difficulties. So let me know you're out there, and we'll kind of wait and see until she comes in because her computer's not loving it right now. So she's on her trying to get it squared away and join us here in a little bit. So let us know you're there. Hi, Karen. I saw you were enjoying Whitson's birthday today, so I'm sure he loved it. Hi, Judy. So, hey, Deb, the usual. Melanie, long time no here. We're just at a trial together. Um, so today, as soon as Joanne joins us, hi, Jane. We're going to Sue. Hi, Sue and Judy and Alicia. We are going to talk about permission and kind of how this topic came up. And because, usually we come up with the topics as we're living some of the stuff. So, or some of the things that we in our business or in our personal life. So that's kind of how it comes up. Or we have a lot of recommendations or, our students are giving us information on what they'd like to talk about or like to hear more about. So hey, Jeanette, how are you? So one of the reasons we wanted to kind of chat about this one was just to be clear up to the dogs, right, about what's expected and all that. And because we have some dogs that I don't think are real clear about what's expected. I am going to try to send something to Joanne here real quick and see if she can join us, because she's having more trouble than she usually does. So she might have to join us on her phone, maybe. Anyway, so one of the thoughts we had about coming up with this is we've seen more and more people get knocked over, dogs, knocking drinks on the floor, all those things, because the dogs are they're just coming right up and jumping on people or whatever. And a lot of it has to do with a lot more than just an excited dog or whatever. And that's why we named this particular talk, he loves whatever. Because usually we excuse things away just because he loves whatever, a person, another dog, or whatever. So I think the bigger problem there is that it's not clear. Here we have Joanne. Nope. Hi.
Hi.
Your computer's still not working?
Yes, it's having a reboot day like I am having today.
All righty then. So, okay. So I was just, we're just going over like how we came up with the topic. Actually, Joanne came up with the topic because I think a dog, I think, knocked her over or was almost knocking her over or whatever. So like I was talking about, a lot of it seems to be that the dog's not real clear about what's okay and what's not okay. And I think it's because we as handlers sometimes give mixed messages. For example, if it's okay to jump up on some people but not other people, the dog that's not real clear for the dog, right? He's not sure what's okay and when it's not okay. So those are kind of things. I'm going to be honest. My dog's usually the one that jumps up the most is Jive, and she's getting better. And I usually don't let her because she's strong and she can hurt somebody. But my shepherd, one of my shepherds, accidentally knocked my mother over quite a few years ago, and it took us on a ride to the emergency room because my mother hit her head when she fell, and wasn't expecting, and we also weren't expecting Cha-Cha to jump up either because she usually never jumps up. But that day she did, and it was a very expensive little situation. So after that, I'm really strict about like no jumping up on people and all that because of what happened there. So I think a lot of it is just us not being very clear what's okay and what's not okay. And a lot of times Well, he likes her. Well, I know that, but it's not like every time you see something, every time you see a bottle of wine, you're not going to just go and chug it. I mean, you have to have some kind of impulse control. So you have to really be thoughtful about um, what's okay and what's not okay. And I think that's kind of, hi, Michelle. And that's, I think, how it kind of came up, right? So, Joanne, I know you came up with it this week's or last week about wanting to talk about it.
I did. I did. Yeah, and it's just I just find it like as a human topic very, very interesting, right? Because I think one of the most interesting things to me is people who are very apologetic about it, right? Like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to get him to not jump on people. But yet you walk in the door with a 6 feet of leash, right? And it's like, well, what's the dog supposed to do, right? If if it's heavily reinforcing for the dog, he likes people, he likes to jump up on people. And even though you're trying not to, you're giving him that opportunity to self-reward himself, right? So just how do we fix that? How do we make it clearer for the dogs? How do we put rules in place? um and I know, Buzz Killington over there has all the rules and regulations, but I'm a little more lax with my dog. um but lax meaning, right, they still have rules. So like Noah loves people, my Vizsla, right? And some people actually do invite him up. So what we have done is don't jump on people unless somebody gives you like that whole pat your chest or gives you the arm, and then he'll jump up, right? The Doberman, on the other hand, dear God, he will. I mean, he'll jump and break your nose, and he just does it in a split second, and it's so hard because he will hurt somebody for real. And so it's like, when we're standing near people, he has maybe a foot of leash, right? So if he jumps, unfortunately, it's going to be a bad experience for him. But yeah, so I know he does that, so I'm trying to train it and manage it, right? Because training only goes so far if it's really self-rewarding, and they're still able to do it, right? So if stealing $100 out of Nancy's purse, had no repercussions for me, right? Except for when she was paying attention. Well, it's really easy to stick my hand in and take $100 out, right? Make sure she's not paying attention. So it's just interesting.
Yeah. And Aaron, yeah, the Aaron did give us that example, and that's the other thing that kind of brought that to our attention. She's eating her lunch, and somebody lets their dog come right up while she's eating lunch, and the dog puts their face in somebody's lunch. I'm like, I don't understand that, right? It's like,
I'm sorry, terribly sorry, he stole your cheeseburger,
right?
Yeah.
And they touched the sandwich in my hand, which, yeah, and it's like, so it's one of those things. You got a slight concussion from a lab. I know. See that, Jill? That's what I'm talking about. The jumping up is a bigger deal because you can really knock somebody over that's not expecting it, and you can actually really your dog can really hurt somebody. Again, like it did with my mom, right? So we don't, and I'm gonna my little dogs, I really don't care if they jump up because I usually, if it's going to be a situation where it's going to be too many people and they might jump up, I'll just pick them up. So it's a double standard, but I'm going to be honest about that. My little dogs, I don't worry about it. My big dogs, they can't. They can actually really, really, truly hurt someone. So I don't allow it. My Shepherds are pretty good. Again, Cha-Cha, that was a kind of an anomaly situation for her because she never usually jumps up. But that day she was excited. She was running full speed, and she knocked my mother down. My Lab, she really likes to jump up. So usually I give her very little opportunities to do that. So on people, unless they ask her to. And so this kind of leads us to how do you take care of that? And again, you want to really think about like for example, that's why I'm like Joanne said, I'm kind of a buzzkill that way. I don't want my dogs jumping on me because they don't understand that I'm wearing work clothes one day, but I'm wearing something else that's you know, a little more dressy and they're jumping on me. They don't understand I have the dress clothes on versus I have, you know, jeans and a t-shirt. They don't get that. So I just don't like to let them jump up at all on me. So that way it's never a problem. Unless I ask them to come up and I invite them to come up and I can pet them and hug them and all that stuff. But usually if I'm like standing up and I'm not that I dress up that much, but when I do, I like to be able to not have a dog on me and rip my shirt or do that to someone else, which is actually more upsetting than if they do it to me, because I can always go change my clothes. But somebody else it's not okay. So, and I know everybody has different rules, and usually when we talk about in my classes, it's like these are the things that we're going to teach you, and you pick and choose. But I think thinking back, I think one of the things we really should enforce that dogs should not be allowed to jump on people or reach over there or whatever without permission, right? And also, and it really comes back to the handler, right? Are you paying attention to your dog? Are you focused on what they're doing and all those kind of things? So, and I'll be honest, sometimes I'm not paying attention as closely as I should be too, but I usually am paying close enough attention. I don't want them to jump on another dog or another person. So I'm usually pretty vigilant about that, because the other dog could result in a dog fight, and the person, you know, and the other thing on a person is just it can be a little bit of a issue. Is that you coming back, Joanne?
It is, but give it just a second.
Should
I'll
I?
let myself in. No, I can do it.
Okay, I will
I
let
can do
you.
it myself.
So,
Ah,
there you are. Yay.
Fixed. Sorry.
Yeah, and so and also non you know, dog people. So I usually tell people they can't jump up or whatever. So one of the things is you want to be very clear if you want to allow them to jump or to visit somebody, like Joanne said. You want to be very clear about what's allowed, right? With her, especially like jumping up. So you want to make sure that if you're going to allow that or you're going to give them permission to do that, that it's really clear when they can do it and when they can't. Which means that you, as the handler, have to be very clear. Like it's got to be a hand signal and a verbal cue or whatever. So it's no question for the dog that it's okay to do it at that time, right? And which might mean they might have to wait a moment until you give them that permission, right, before they jump up or whatever. So so you want to be, because I think clarity is where we miss the boat a little bit here, like what's okay and what's not okay. And I'm gonna pick on Joanne's dog. The night we had at the hotel room, we were going to a show. We were going to be at a dog show, and the Doberman was just a wild beast. He rolled the bed across the way, and he was just going on. And again, Joanne's a little calmer about those things.
I was not in the room, to be fair. Let's just.
That's true. That's right.
You were getting. I was not allowing that to happen while I was present.
So then Bam and I had a little moment, and I was like, "Don't do that ever again. I don't like that. Don't do it." So it was very. And you know what? That dog is such a good boy, and he never did it again the whole trip. So it was pretty funny. Because she's mean, but it's certain things are, you know, you can't allow your dog, you know, certain things, like I am a little bit a little bit of a buzzkill that way, especially when it's other people's property. If it's my own property, I don't like it, but I don't get it's not as stressful for me. But if it's other people's stuff, I get a little bit more worked up about it.
Yeah, and I saw Marilyn had a question earlier, right? Like, what if you don't want your dog to jump? Well, if you don't want your dog to jump on anybody or anything ever, you have to set that up, right? You have to set that expectation that have other people ask the dog to jump up and the dog still knows, no, I don't do that, right? So you definitely have to tell them, right? Because if they're not clear on an expectation and somebody asks them to do something that they feel like might be rewarding, they're going to do it, right? It's just like a toddler.
And jumping up is very reinforcing, just in general.
Yes.
Yeah, even if they're not jumping on anybody, just jumping for some dogs is super, super reinforcing, which means, Marilyn, to train that, right? Some dogs, at the sight of a person, they're so excited. And even when they're 10 feet away, you could see they're getting ready to jump up. So until your dog can handle that person 10 feet away, they're sure as hell not going to be able to be okay when the person's standing in front of you. So you have to do a slow progression to that and build that impulse control, especially if you have a young dog, right? If they can't see a person 10 feet away without losing their minds, then don't. You're not going to. Touching is just going to be horrible. So
Right.
Don't do it. You eventually can get there, but it's going to take some time, right? You're not going to be able to get there right away. So you have to be able to. And I've had to do that with my shepherd, my male shepherd. He loves people, and he won't jump up on them, but he will try to drag me to go visit people, and I just can't have that. He's too big. He's 95 pounds, and I'm no. You can't drag me to go see people because you want to. I can't have that. So we worked on it. He's better, but he's still again, it's going to be always a work in progress because when I see people, I do not let him just go up to, even though he doesn't jump up, but he can't drag me there either.
Yeah. And, you think about just a safety factor. I mean, Nancy's a very, very good dog handler, but that dog, I've watched him. He can pull her if he wants to. If he wants to take her for a ride, he will. And it's like Suzanne Clothier has a really good, if you try and control their body, you're not going to win. You have to try and control their mind, right? Or work with them instead of hold them back, because some of these guys are so big. I mean, the Doberman's huge too, right? Sometimes I can barely hold on if he's really aroused. And so that's where you really have to take the time, like Nancy was saying, right? If I know that people are super over arousing or whatever, I'm going to have to start farther back and try and gain control and, reward them for what I want as opposed to fight them for what they want.
Right. And once you're getting into that physical power struggle, you've already lost.
Yep.
So you want to make sure you engage your brain. And Hannah, thank you. I'm glad your play times are getting better. Hannah is in Georgia, and we had some inappropriate dog stuff happening with her little delicate flower, and now all she did was change how to greet and the rules for greeting other dogs, because that's really what it's all about, right? It's not that you don't want them to do it. You just want them to do it in a different way or in a more controlled way. And it's hard because I always struggle with, how much control do you put on a dog? Because then there's always the other side of that coin where you're like controlling that dog to death, right? It's like, then they don't get to be a dog and they don't get to enjoy dog things. So I think just putting rules around what they can and then allowing them to enjoy the things that they like, but with rules. Just because they like it doesn't mean they can just run wild. Because the truth is, they still have to be dogs. They still have to run. They still have. But I usually never start an interaction with a person or another dog when they're overstimulated. I just don't. Because nothing good ever happens with that stuff. Always bad things happen. Somebody gets bit, somebody falls down, nothing good ever comes of it. So I'm kind of a big, over the years I've learned that, like, nope, even the one time that you let it slide is when, something bad will happen. And then you feel bad because, they knock somebody over, they, whatever happens. So I'm kind of a big on like, nope. They get to meet other people and meet other dogs in a much more controlled fashion, even if they're friends. Like Aaron's dog Vixen and Tango love each other, but they don't get to start playing just like wild animals. It's a very controlled start, and then they get to play. Otherwise, it's just and they like each other. Probably nothing will happen, but it'll be that one day that we don't take care of it and something bad happens, where they get into an altercation or something happens, or they get caught up or whatever on something. So it's just really like Joanne says, I'm kind of a buzzkill that way, but
Nancy would have sent her kids to boarding school. So
Military academy.
right, I'm sorry, military academy. Yes, correct. Or nuns with rulers. I'm not sure which one, but
Yeah.
so it's interesting though, just to to bring up this part of the conversation. I know we've talked about it on other topics before, but there is a difference between management and training. Okay, so I struggle myself a lot with the Doberman, right? I really, really do, because he is just a dog that I hate to use the word fight, but I do. I fight arousal all the time. Okay. He is like a Lamborghini with no power steering fluid, right? I mean, he likes to go really fast and take corners, right? So it's who he is. And so I really, really struggle trying to keep him, in the right frame of mind. So yeah, when I was saying, when we're around people, I keep him on a 1 foot leash, right? I do that to manage the situation so nothing dangerous happens. But at the same time, I'm watching him and I'm rewarding him and I'm telling him what a good dog he is when he can hold it together. And so if you always just walk around with your hand in the dog's collar, right, that's not training. You're just managing a situation. And don't think for a second that there's a problem that's fixed, even if it's been a year, if you haven't actually put the time into training. Okay. I kind of think about it, in terms of like food, right? If you would think my dog doesn't ever steal food and you never set it up to give them the opportunity, right? You're like, I'm not really sure if they'd steal it or not. I just have never let them know. Or never given them the opportunity to steal it. So hence they won't steal food. Well, that's not technically the equation. So just keep that in your mind. Management is not training. So if you want to know if they're trained, you have to test them in that situation. So that's where I would get someone who knows. I have a jumper, right? If my dog seems under control, we might do some one step sits. Can they maintain? If they can't sit at 6 feet away, don't go any closer, right?
Right. So, a couple of things, and for those, I know a lot of you don't train with us, but one of the hallmarks that we use a lot of, or I use personally, and I know Joanne does too, is the auto check-in that Suzanne Clothier teaches. So the auto check-in is where the dog voluntarily gives you their attention. This really helps dogs that are anxious. This helps put rules, right? To check in with me before you make a decision to do anything, whether it's be reactive to other dogs. So once they understand the check-in, you're going to check in with me, and then we're going to make a decision on what's going to happen in this scenario, right? So that's one of the things that we, and you can use that for if you have a dog like that's a jumper, like with Jive. If I have a treat and I don't have to worry about her jumping, because she won't ever. If there's food or if I'm doing a check-in with her, she will be able to hold and be able to control herself really, really well in that situation, in whatever situation that is. For Tango, it's a little more challenging, right? He loves people that much. So I have to put a little bit more structure around it because he does love people so much. So the auto check-in, I think you can find on, God, I think you can find it on Suzanne's website, I believe.
Yeah, so and I will tell you, she just is offering a new set of auto check-in classes. So if you're interested in really learning how to do that from the person who created it, definitely check that out. It's totally worth your while to understand that and train that with your dogs and anyone you know. It's great. It's
different than a watch me.
Yes.
It is not a watch me. It looks like it, but it's not.
Right.
And that's the first thing. It's like that helps you stay connected to your dog in every situation. So again, going back to Marilyn, if the dog can't check in with you while the person's 10 feet away, then you can't move on. Basically, you'd get the dog to check in. They'd be able to look at the person. Let's say a person's there, but they can come back and check in with you. That tells you that they can handle that. They can split their attention. That's the sweet spot you're looking for when you're working impulse control, or you're working some of these, issues, right? So you can check in, come back to me, and then eventually that person can get closer and closer. So that's one of the ways to work jumping up or pulling to other dogs, because with Tango, that's really, for him, I don't worry about, it's not the jumping up that's an issue, it's the pulling me to whatever he wants. He cannot pull me to see and do whatever he feels like it. That is not okay. He cannot drag me all over. So that's what you meant. If your dog is dragging you to other people and other dogs, he is not clear that he goes, oh, look, another dog, I'm going to go see it and just take you along. That's no. Unless you're okay with it, which I can't imagine you would be, because that's really dangerous for a dog, right? To drag you to see another dog that may not want to visit your dog and might end up in a situation, right? So and that's kind of how you work it. And you work it when they're, and like I did it a lot when my dogs were young. And even still, then they were fine, and then adolescent hit, and then you have to go back and refresh it, because if you don't, you're still gonna have the problem. So just because they were great as puppies does not mean as adults that they're going to be okay. So that's kind of what you want to have, that sweet spot. Check in with you, but look at whatever they're interested in. A squirrel, another person, another dog, whatever, anything like that. It's like, no, you have to check in with me before you're able to do that, right?
Yeah, and I will tell you, if you let your dog drag you to places that they want to go, people or dogs, right? And you're working on jumping up, or you're working on good interactions with dogs, just the art of dragging you there is already going to intensify the interaction between the dog or the other person, right? So if you can keep that under control and make them, keep their brain in their head as they approach, it's going to totally help. So, because we've all seen those dogs that run over and they're doing this before they even get to you, right? So, if you walk over and you ask them to sit, we're not meeting somebody until you can be under control, right? It really, really helps the dog understand and keep their brain. Right.
And so you want to be able to, and this is where, and Suzanne has a wonderful article, which I will put a link on this, it's called Even Though he likes that person, even though the dogs need to be clear. This is okay and this is not okay. Even though that's happening, even though they've got to stay connected to you before you give them permission to do that. And again, I always worry, because I try to be middle of the road. I think dogs should have certain manners and certain things, but I also think they also should have time and freedom to be dogs, right? So too much control, because we see the other side of that spectrum too. We see where there's so much control, and it's not mutual respect and permission and clarity. It's the human controlling the dog, not allowing him to do stuff, right? That is different than the dog understanding, okay, I can't do that now, but maybe later I can go visit, right? It's a very different feel, right? When the human is controlling the dog and controlling the interaction, versus the dog and they're making that decision. It's like, okay, not right now, but later on, and having that be understood between the dog and the person.
Yes. I think we've all seen, I kind of call it that prisoner scenario, where the dog must stay in heel position, and he can't sniff the floor, and he can't smell people, and he can't look at people, and he can't, right? It's like, wow, like imagine if you did that to your kid, somebody would call DCFS on you, right? Like it's like that military academy, right? Sorry.
Yeah.
But I mean, really to the nth degree. And I don't know where it came from, if people think like that's a really well-behaved dog, but I mean, you wouldn't do that to a friend of yours. We're going to work on something that's really, really hard. And I expect a heavy level of discipline for this period of time. And then, okay, now take a break, right? Go pee, go sniff the bush, go say hi to the person, whatever it is.
Right. And so the big thing if is clarity. You want to be clear. Sometimes they're going to get to meet people. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're going to go see the dog. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're going to get to chase a squirrel, which I don't think there is such a thing, but okay, maybe there is. But and sometimes it's okay, and sometimes you can't do it. They have to be able to understand that maybe today, maybe here you can, but you might not be able to tomorrow. And by having that connection with your dog and the dog understanding that, it really is very helpful when then the dog is clear. Okay, you can't greet that person, but you can greet this person, or you can greet another dog and things like that. So, but that comes through training, right? Again, check in. How far away can they be? Can they be right by you? Can the dog sit there while you're having a conversation? All those things you want to work towards, right? And be able to the dog to get it and understand it, and when you're not physically manipulating the dog to do what you want, because that's different. You want the dog to understand it and get that information, not that you are physically manipulating them into doing that, what you're asking, because that's not the same thing.
Right. And if you really, really want to work on this, if you have that place that you go, maybe it's the dog park if people still go there. Maybe it's, a training class where everyone says hi to everybody else's dogs before you start. Maybe it's the neighbor's yard where, you get to go and play with the neighbor dog, whatever, right? When the expectation of the dog is such that every time I get to go run around and be crazy before we do things, right? That's the perfect time to try and train, right? Yep. I know that this is the place that we go and say hi to everybody, but before we do that this time, right, I'm going to ask you to sit, or I'm going to ask you to check in with me, or I'm going to ask you to, hang out for just a second, right? We're going to take 90 seconds and we're going to sit here in this chair and be calm, cool, and collected. And then we'll go greet people. And the dog, when they first start, are like, what? That's not the rules for this place, right? And so, those are the moments where you really want to implement some of this and let the dog know, I know this is the normal place and we normally do this, but today I'm asking you to hang out with me for a second before.
Right. And you guys, anytime you're having two dogs play, even if they know each other, just letting them run like just crazy is not, again, nothing really comes of it. I know sometimes we have Melanie and Joanne's dogs and my dogs, but we never start play, and Amy's dogs, we never start them playing just wild. We have them sit for a minute and then we allow them to play, and we do it every time. So Hannah, I know that's what I asked you to do for your dog, but yeah, we do it with our own as well. We have to, because we have big, strong, powerful dogs. and we're, usually after a trial, we are not in any condition to break up a dog fight. So we just don't let it set it. We don't just never set it up, and we put pairs of dogs together that can be together, that play nicely together. And that's it. And there's rules for it. And once they get overstimulated, they get a timeout and they get to calm down a little bit. I mean, and that we do it every single time. Consistency is important. I think Judy mentioned it before.
Yeah. And it goes with the topic, right? He just loves to play with other dogs. Still important. And I know we work on this where we'll have treats on the table. And if our dogs are playing, hey, come over here for just a second. Here's a cookie. Okay, now go back and play. And I'll give you the perfect example. My giant Doberman was playing with one of Melanie's younger Vizsla at the time. And they had been playing for a good 10 minutes. It was lovely. They were having a good time. And Melanie finished a water bottle and crinkled it. And if you know anything about our Vizslas, like those are toys that are in the whelping box. Like they love the crinkled up water bottles. So she chucks it on the floor, and Bliss was like, woohoo. And I saw Bam's face turn like, what's that? And why do you have it? I mean, I was like, hey buddy, come over here. Right. And thankfully he did. He came right over and I was like, okay, time for a break for you. Cause it was going to go south. Right. As soon as we put in that weird toy, he was like, no, I don't, you shouldn't have that. So, but because we practice, even when you're stimulated and playing, you still have to listen, right? And I'm going to send you right back to play. So why would you not come over, get a cookie, and then go back and play for a minute? But it's important, even when they're overstimulated, to get and teach them, I'm still important. You still have to listen, even though.
Right. Especially when they're in that state of arousal. And that might mean in the beginning, especially with a dog like Bam, he didn't play for very long because he couldn't early on. But now he's a more mature boy, so he can handle it a little bit more. So And again, this doesn't mean over controlling the dog, because the dog should have doggy time. It's just a matter of making sure those interactions are balanced, right? They're not overly you just let them go wild, or they're not so structured that the dog is, miserable and it's not having any fun. And it's and then sometimes the more control we put on that interaction, the worse actually gets. The more stressed the dog gets, and the more things can go wrong with too much control over the dog and the environment and the situation. And don't do this and don't do that. You can cause somebody to a dog to get really stressed, and then bad things happen. And I'll give you an example. If I say, oh, hey, could you get that for me? Oh, well, okay, yeah, get it, but don't tip it. Don't bring it over here. Don't, after what it's going to stress the hell out of whoever you're asking to bring something to you, right? No. Anyway, so those are things that you wanna consider, right? Too much involvement from the person is a bad thing. The other thing too is if you're trying to get, make sure if you're going to use treats with other dogs around, that's an okay thing to do, right? Because that sometimes isn't for some breeds or some dogs. So it's one of those things to consider, right? And you want to, you got the article, Joanne? That was good.
I did.
Even though, and then there's another one that's the permission, not permissive, because that's the other thing that I wanted to. And actually, I happened to be talking to Suzanne about it not long ago. Here's an interesting thing. She mentioned, somebody said that the dog pulls, but it was a rescue and it was found in the dumpster. Well, what does the fact that dog was in the dumpster have to do with the dog is pulling you at 2 and 3 years old? One does not have anything to do with the other. So for those of us who rescue, once I'm going to be honest, once the dog's been with you for, I don't know, a year, it's your dog. Whatever that dog is or isn't is you, right? There's a genetic component too, but it's like you cannot have a dog that, she was abandoned, 10 years ago. That was 10 years ago. So it's probably fine now, right? Or probably she's over it now, but you're not. So it's one of those things you really want to consider and be mindful of, that you're not using their hard story or their hard thing not to excuse some of the behavior that they may be having or doing or not doing. If they've been with you for a while, or if you've had them as a puppy, we can do a lot to make their lives better when you get them young. The younger you get them, the better off you are. It's harder when they're a little older, but now if you've had he was found in the dumpster when he was 6 months old, but now he's 6 and he's still dragging you all over the place. One has nothing to do with the other. So you need to, and that's a pretty difficult thing, because in rescue, or people tend to have that people tend to hang on to all that baggage the dog comes with. They pack up that bag and they carry it out with them everywhere the dog goes forever, for their whole life. So,
is so interesting, right? Because I think if you ask the dog, hey, we're still hauling all this baggage, and the dog's like, I don't know why you're still carrying that. Like, I left that behind a long time ago, right? So it's, I think one of the best ways, even if you're not involved with like a dog trainer or whatever, ask your friends, the people who hang out with you the most. Do you think the dog is still scared of, or do you think the dog is still bothered by, fill in the blank, whatever it is, right? And if your friends are saying, no, I don't really see it, the dogs do move through things, and it's true. We definitely hold on a lot longer than they do. So it's hard to let that stuff go, right? Because it's part of what kind of brought that dog to you or made that dog special in a certain way, right? Because, look at how sad Fifi was, whatever, right? But once Fifi's like, no, I got it now, right? And we're still trying to baby her. that's when dogs, and I'll take Beth for an example. Beth and John rescued an Australian Shepherd Gidget, right? And I believe she came from like an Amish kind of puppy mill. She really didn't know anything. She didn't know the world. She was scared by life, and she was a runner. I mean, if you dropped that leash, she was gone. And they took some care with her to be cautious and nice, and boy, she hit that wall, and she's like, I can get away with a lot more than the other dog can. And so you started to see it, and she's just a little jerk sometimes now, right? So it's like, no, you're going to start putting some more rules and regulations on that dog, because she knows exactly what's going on. So
she goes,
but it's funny, and they do, and they will start to take advantage big time.
Mm-hmm. So. So that's what I mean. So that's where we become way more permissive than we should be, because they had a hard time, or this was difficult, or whatever, and so we allow a lot more. We excuse and allow a lot more things that you would never. And the dogs, they figure it out quick. They're like, wait a minute, this is all right. I can do whatever. So you want to be really mindful of that. I again, I had 7 rescues of my own, but what they were or weren't or whatever during their life was all me. Even though I got them over a year, it didn't matter. Yeah, there were some genetic components to it, but the training and who they became and all that was what I did, what I put into them, good, bad, or otherwise. And so, and I think it's just, and we not to put too much pressure on those dogs, or not put too many rules because they had such a tough time. But you're not doing them any favors by not helping them. Dogs, especially dogs that tend to have anxiety problems, they tend to really benefit from a little more structure. Not a lot more, where you can't let them breathe, but a little more structure is very, very helpful for them.
Yep. And just so you guys know, right, not that it's all lecture time, it's really easy to become a little lax in certain things, right? It's super easy. Like, oh, that's just my friend Fred. And, he loves Fred so much. I mean, and Fred loves him. So Fred likes him to jump up. Okay, fine. But, right, we're throwing out the rules of everyone else on the planet when we allow him to do that to Fred. Even though Fred says it's okay, right? That's the moment where we're going to train with Fred today, right? He could jump all over you when you ask him to, right. Once we get there and he shows his restraint, right, and his self-control, then, yeah, you guys can have the time of your lives, but it's going to take us 2 minutes before we get there. So.
Right. And I'm going to give you an example. I had one of my trainers, this was years ago, her dog, lovely dog, love her. She loved me. I loved her. It was all love fest. She jumped up so hard, she almost knocked my 2 front teeth out. That would have been horrible. So that would have been horrible. So early, and I saw, I think my nose got all bruised because that's how hard she hit me. Luckily, my teeth stayed in my head at that time. I don't know if they would stay now, but they stayed then. It was a long time ago.
Yeah, I did get a tooth chipped by a border collie way back in the day, who they were training her to jump up at the line for an agility after the runs, and she just got very confused, and she jumped, and I had my mouth open, and she hit me in the bottom of the chin, and it chipped one of my teeth. I was so mad, but thankfully it was a small chip. It didn't require any dental work. It just filed itself out. But
yeah, Michelle, but you know what? Being clear with dogs, but we also have to be clear with people too. Mm-hmm. The dog thing, it does translate a lot, because sometimes you make assumptions that people understand this and that, and they don't. So it's really dog training and I still I'm not as clear as I should be, but it really is important to be really clear about what the expectation is, what you want, what's okay, what's not okay. It's really, really important for all communication with all animals, each other, dogs. But with dogs, it's the clearer you are, the easier it will be going forward, because they'll understand and they remember better than most people. So it'll be a better a better thing. But yeah, because sometimes I am remiss about being more clear about this is what I expect or these are my expectations. With my dogs, they kind of get that mostly because I'm a lot clearer with them than sometimes I can be with people because I figured, oh yeah, they'll get it. So being clear and very consistent is really important. And the one in the article that I posted there, Suzanne said, if you want to know what it looks like, right? Videotape yourself training your dog or walking your dog or whatever, and then turn off the sound and ask somebody to look at it and ask them what they think you're training. Sometimes what we think we're doing is nothing like what we're supposed to be doing. I think that's an awesome suggestion because I have seen myself on video and you're like, okay, that's not exactly what I thought.
Like, I don't know what I was doing.
So sometimes it's a great exercise, right? Tape yourself training your dog, and then you can see if you're being very clear or not, or if the dog's understanding it, right? It's a great way to see where you are on and with that training. If you're training a dog to stay or not walk or not pull on a leash, all those things, videotape it and then look at it with no sound, and have somebody else look at it and say, hey, what do you think I was training there? Because it'd be interesting to sign. It'd be interesting to see what information you get, what they think you're training versus what you were really training.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and Christy, you're right. I have a feeling any Doberman that comes after this one's going to feel that like a little bit. But yeah, I mean, it is when you have multiple dogs. I think it's easier to get lax because when our dogs are trained and they become adults and they're very well behaved, and you get that puppy who did pretty good, and then all of a sudden you hit adolescence and you're like, whose dog are you? We worked on all this, right? So I have to tell you, poor Christy sent me a message and she said, is this topic about me? Because we had a UKC trial.
Lots of us, trust me.
Oh no. Yeah. I said, trust me, not about you. We had a UKC trial, and Christy's dog, who was doing really well, and all of a sudden, now I played a little part in the first time because I was like, hi buddy, and he got all very over aroused, and she reacted totally appropriately. She walked away, she sat him, she got him back, and then he got a little over aroused by another dog, right? But she worked it perfectly. Nope, we're not doing that right now. Come over here and we're gonna hang out and wait and be calm. So it was, but then she has her princess poodle who's like, you came to see me, correct? Let me just wait. You can touch me now, right? So she's so perfect. It's hard when you have two totally different dogs, right? Which one is at the end of the leash? So
right. Yeah, no, Christy, there's lots of us, including myself included. Sometimes we get a little bit relaxed on stuff and we are not clear. So it's everybody makes that when we get used to it, because that happened like Joanne just said with my adolescent dogs. They were great puppies. I put all that work in, and then they were pretty good, and then I kind of relaxed a little bit, and I'm like, okay, got to go back to that, because and that happens to everybody. I'm even gonna that everybody does that. It's like, oh well, and then you're like, oh, he knows it. No, he doesn't. He might have fallen off, especially if they're young. It's okay to go back and refresh that training or reinforce it and make it clear again. Like, okay, it is normal for us as people to just not backslide a little bit.
Yeah. Loose leash walking, I think it goes along with everything else that we're talking about, right? If the dog becomes too overstimulated with the environment, you have to back up some. So a lot of times that means creating more distance between you and whatever the interesting thing is. I still struggle with this with the 3-year-old Doberman. He's just a jerk sometimes. And it's like, okay, today we're going to work in the living room, right? Because outside is like, there's a squirrel and there's a this and there's a that. And he struggles some days. So, I mean, when it goes bad, if there's a ton of other stuff around, leave, right? Get out of Dodge and increase the distance and wait for the dog to calm down before you try again. But I mean, that's pretty much the rule for most any training that goes bad, right? Either the dog doesn't understand what you're trying to ask them to do, or they're overstimulated and they're struggling to pay attention and think, and so you have to fix that.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes, Jill, if the dog is just overstimulated, that's when you have to manage it.
Mm-hmm.
Pick the dog up, go the other way. You know,
Yeah.
you're not training at that point, right? And that's okay to go between training and management. It's a normal part of being in the world. That's why it's like people have expectations the dog should be perfect. I'm like, well, yay for you if you've got a perfect dog, because I don't, and I am not nobody's a perfect handler that's going to be run on top of it all the time, right?
Nope.
I am a little bit more mindful with Tango because he's so big and because he can actually. And actually, the lab too is pretty. She's strong too, but she's a little more connected to me on a more regular basis. She likes people and dogs, but she likes me more, which is helpful, right? Where Tango loves, he's like the social butterfly of the group, and Chacha's also a lot more connected to me than, and not that he isn't, but it's just different. He loves other things. Sometimes will trump me. Not always, but a lot of times. If I talk to him and I get him his attention and focus, then it's usually not a problem. But if I don't, if I miss the mark on it, then I have to manage it. Yeah, Jill, that's the problem. You can do management is okay, and it's necessary when we have dogs for many reasons. But you do definitely have to get in there and get some training done, because it is easy to stay in that management zone all the time, because it's easier. It's not that much work. You just have to get them out of the way or pick them up or whatever it is. So you got to remember to go back and fill it in with some training, so that you're not always managing. Because if you're always managing, because management will fail, always will fail. So
yeah, for sure.
Our dogs are not robots, they're living. Yeah. And that's what I mean. It's like that's what I mean. Don't beat yourself up too much about missing the mark on stuff. We all do it. Just be a little bit more mindful and try better the next day. No, like I said, back in the day when I was a young trainer, I was like, oh my God, these people's dogs are perfect. Well, yeah, they were perfect in that environment, but in the real life, they're not so much.
Oh yeah. So, I mean, I'll tell you, the giant Doberman, I have some rally titles on him. You would never think that in a million years if you saw us walking in a parking lot somewhere sometimes, right? I mean, it's insane. You're like, you have what now? How did you do that? So but yeah, it is environmental. But again, right, when you set that expectation, hey, we're in this training room. Yes. And we're expected to behave in here. That's why sometimes people say, oh, my dogs are so much better in obedience class than they are at home. Well, yeah, but when you think about, I just had this discussion with one of my classes last week. I said, how much attention do you think you're giving your dog? Right? 100, 110%? They're like, yeah. How much do you give them on a regular walk? And they're like, yeah, okay, good point, right? And are you rewarding as much as you do when you're truly focused on them in a class? No, we don't do that. Right. So, like, imagine if we could just take a class and make it more so in our lives. But I think, Nancy and I are pretty realistic. Life gets in the way sometimes. Sometimes I can't stare at you and tell you what a great dog you are because I'm trying to have a conversation with the bug guy or whatever, right? Life happens. It's just a matter of just keep on keeping on and, do as much as you can and be as clear as you possibly can to the dog. Yeah.
But being very clear about what you want and because a lot of times when you have bad behavior, usually it's reinforcing for the dog in some way. And somehow they are not understanding that what you want. So when you look at it like that, it's like, okay, I guess I wasn't clear about what I want. This is what I want. This is not what I want. Right. And I'll be honest, I'm going through a little struggle with that with my shepherd, with the barking. He barks in my office. The trigger is the front door. And he barks in the car. Again, going in and out is a trigger for the dog. I am trying to really figure out how I can get him to stop doing that, right? Because it's driving me crazy. He doesn't do it at home. He never barks at home, where he should probably bark, but never does. He doesn't guard. Somebody could be knocking, pounding on the door, not a peep out of him. But somebody comes through that front door in my business and he can't shut up. So there you go. So it's like, okay, somehow he's thinking he's protecting, or but he's not very protective in any other way. So I have to try to figure out how to get him, because trying to figure out how to get him to understand, I don't want you to bark here, right? Or here. And, so maybe I have to give an outlet to bark. Maybe teaching him to bark would be helpful. I don't know. But we're working on it. That's everything. He's perfect in every way except that. That's where we have our struggles. But everybody has those, right? Is it clear? Does he really understand what I want? Clearly not, because he can't shut up. So there you go. But he doesn't bark, like he's not barking everywhere else, just there. So.
Yeah, Aaron, I think with puppy class specifically, right? It's so overstimulating for them, so they do worse in puppy class versus, beginner obedience when they've come and they're a little more familiar with the building. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's great. I'm glad they do better at home. That is where they live and do all their stuff.
Mm-hmm. So Katie, you're how to get your dog to control his licking. So
he's very, very friendly, and he when he jumps, he likes to lick your face, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So maybe seeing if he can control it when he's not jumping up, because he's probably a pretty kinesthetic dog anyway.
It's and Katie, we talk about it all the time. It's the overstimulation piece. He loves people so much, right? Mm-hmm. And he also enjoys licking. So it's like, when he is made to control himself and really take the time to think about it, right? He's so much better at it. So it's just hard coming into a new room right? But that's everything we're talking about, which is like, I know these are all your friends and this is where you have fun. And you know what? We're not going to meet anybody right now. We're going to sit and we're going to hang out for a second. So.
And Judy, my pack, the little one my little dogs are the ones that bark in the house, not the big ones. So I guess he's got his posse to do it for him. Yeah. And the girls in my office and the lab and Cha-Cha don't usually bark. So he figures it's his job. I don't know, but I wish he'd stop it, because I'm good without it. So we all have our things, right? Like, how do I make it clear what I do want, right? What I don't want, and what's okay. So anyway, hopefully, I hope you guys got being clear and setting up really good expectations about things you want. But I have to say, like I said, with my little dogs, I don't worry so much about jumping up. But with my big dogs, because it can be very expensive, or it could be really bad for somebody if your dog jumps on them and stuff. So I think I would be across the board. That would be a no. That would be a no. And just watching your dogs more and then working on it more is just really helpful. And when you can't work on it, because let me tell you, sometimes you don't want to work on it. Put the dog in a crate and go and socialize and hang out and do your thing. That's okay too. That's all. Yep. That's not a bad thing, right? Because it's like I do that. Sometimes I can't. So I want to just relax and think. So I will put my dogs up and visit. And if I feel like I have the energy and the ability to sit and work my dog and visit, I'll do it. But when I don't, I won't, because I don't want to. So
yeah, and just leaving you on that, it's better to not train than it is to halfway train, right?
Right.
So if you're missing a whole bunch of opportunities, right, to reward really good behavior, or half the time they're jumping and half the time they're not because you're trying to have a nice conversation, put them up, man. It's such mixed signals for the dog. So if you're not going to be committed to that, just don't do it. Do it later.
Right. All right. If anybody has any questions, you can put them in the chat. I sent you. You guys should have the link for the 2 articles of Suzanne's. Suzanne's also doing some workshops coming up. She's doing a relationship assessment, and she's got a bunch of other ones. It's to be arranged for. Yeah, I know that. Jane, that's a really tough one with the family, how much they like. Your family likes the dogs, but the dogs love me. It's like, I know, but I don't want them to jump up. So yeah, I get it. But yeah, so it's like you definitely have to get the buy-in from the family. And sometimes when there's a lot of people, I usually use, like for my lab, I use food because it's easier. She'll sit and she'll be reinforced, and then she usually doesn't jump up so much. It kind of works out. Anyway, I want to post
Emily, I still think that has a little bit to do with anxiety with Ellie. It would be really interesting to kind of set it up on purpose, right? Like, I'm a big fan of YouTube videos now because you can find almost any noise that you want to on YouTube, right? So, maybe just working a sit and quiet, and you can have kind of that baby noise playing, and you can click it whenever you want to, and work on being quiet and treating her for quiet. Same thing with dogs. I mean, I would just increase the distance of the dog, right? But I really do. I think it has to do a little bit more with her anxiety, and you're, a little more her main handler than your husband. So, but I think you can get there. You just have to set it up and work it when it's not real, right?
Right. Yeah. I was gonna put another one here. What was it? The stimulus gradient.
Mm-hmm.
Training thresholds.
Yeah. So while she's looking at that, the stimulus gradient is another Suzanne Clothier. She put it together, but it's kind of basic math in terms of how to handle dogs, right? You can't turn up the volume on the distraction piece without pulling something else back, right? You can't over arouse them in one area without helping something else. So if you're blasting everything all at once, it's not going to work, right? You have to work each area. So, right, you have duration. So I'm not going to work for 5 minutes where there's 17 dogs next to us and they're all running around chasing balls, right? Like that's too much. I might work 30 seconds where, the dogs are across a football field. One dog is across a football field chasing a ball, right? I might do that. So that's how you kind of break that down. You have to remove a couple of things for good training before you can, get it all together and expect your dog to be successful.
Yeah. And it's hard to work one thing at a time, but I don't think she has it here, training thresholds, but I think she does have a video on it. Oh, here it is. Suzanne has a lot of stuff, and we obviously use a lot of her stuff anyway. Yeah. So I'm going to put in two. One of them is go say hi when you're going to visit other dogs, but also when you are going to, visit people too. So teach them how to do that. We used to have a class on it, and Lisa and I might do another one where you can do the go say hi and meet and greets and stuff like that. So
yeah, it's basically you're training greetings with dogs and people, right? So you're letting them know when you can control yourself, I will cue you to go ahead and go say hi. So
right. And we actually will try to do more workshops on that, live and maybe streamed if we can, in 2022. This year is already really not going to happen, but we can try to do it for the new year, because it's a great workshop. We've done it. We did it many years before, so we're going to try to go back to that. All right, everyone. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Thanks, everybody.